Welcome to a Tippling Philosopher production, one of my rare excursions into the world of YouTube. And I'm absolutely ecstatic to welcome someone who I've been marginally obsessed with recently, along with a few others on YouTube because of the quality of the content that he kicks out. And that is not on his own, of course. There's a team that he works with, but it is Dr. Josh Bowen. So, Josh, welcome and hello.
Oh, really appreciate you having me on. That's very kind.
Basically, I was just having a chat with John Loftus, well, I wasn't having a chat with him directly, but I was, interacting with him on Facebook, and he posted that, this book's a really good book. I'm looking forward to reading it, and it was your book that I would love to shove up in front of everyone's faces here and say what a wonderful book, but I've got it on Kindle, so it's a great book. He comes prepared.
You see, this is what happens when your wife is in charge, right? She's like, look, you need to just have the book sitting there. So that's
sure. And
pays off.
And it's a damn good book. I haven't fully read it, but I am in the process of reading it. I'm dipping into about 5 million books because I'm writing a book on deconstructing the Exodus accounts in the Bible. And what a perfect book. So I thought, this guy looks really cool. So I started looking into Digital Hammurabi. Oh my goodness, what an awesome resource with some fantastic guests. And there was yourself, and I thought you would be a great fit for writing a forward. And I just shot you a message, and lo and behold, you actually said yes. So fingers crossed the book's half decent so that you will still say yes. Do you just want to give a quick intro, a quick bio for yourself and talk a little bit about your book?
Yeah. So I grew up very much a fundamentalist evangelical Christian. You could say very, very early. And for maybe 25, 26 years, that's who I was. And I eventually went to the Air Force. And while I was there, I got my bachelor's degree from the very conservative evangelical school, Liberty University, in religion. And then I went to Capital Bible Seminary, another evangelical school, and got a master's degree in theology, focusing in on Old Testament, Hebrew Bible. And that got me accepted into Johns Hopkins University, which is still sort of surprising to me because I know how not smart I am. So it was really neat to get into a school like that. And I remember, just as a funny aside, when they did accept me and I found out, I was at lunch. I went out to lunch with several of the faculty members. And I remember the first one that I sat down with, I was so nervous. I said, I was really surprised that you guys accepted me, which was a weird thing to say, I think. He advised me not to repeat that.
Do you ever feel the imposter syndrome at all?
Oh my God. All day, every day. Yeah. I mean, I think this is sort of due. Actually, I was just talking to Dr. Jim Majors about this.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, he just defended his dissertation. So he's now Dr. Majors.
Yeah.
And, he said, Josh, it's so weird. I don't feel like I deserve this. And I think it boils down to, we know who the giants are in the field.
Yeah.
I know Joel Baden, right?
Yeah,
and so when I talk about the Pentateuch, what am I saying about it? It's what he says about it that you want to listen to.
God, he's written some good books.
Yeah, he really has.
I've quoted the bejesus out of him actually in my Exodus book, but yeah. So carry on. In fact, I interrupted you when you were saying that where you'd got to in your bio, in your extensive letter. You're a name with many letters in your bio. So I interrupted you. Carry on.
So at Johns Hopkins, I became an atheist, and
is that one of their courses?
Yeah, you would think so. No, I think, and I've told this story a number of times, I guess, in different places, but I mean, just like the short version of it is, it was really hard to maintain any type of fundamentalist reading of the biblical text
Yeah,
once you're confronted with the ancient Near East.
yeah.
It's really, really tough to do.
So, so
Um,
in, and I know I'm interrupting you because actually this was one of the
no,
main areas I wanted to speak to you about, because I find your deconversion fascinating, because I've long maintained that the weakness of Christianity and the Abrahamic faith, but the weakness of Christianity is the Old Testament. And I remember years ago watching William Lane Craig in debate, and he was challenged in the Q&A on the Old Testament, and he just held up Paul Copan's book, Is God a Moral Monster, and said, read that, and then put it down, and then right, next question. And you're like, hang on, that's a real cop out. And to me, that said, you realize that this is a weak spot for Christianity, and
yes,
you're not prepared to debate it in public because it's
yes,
so fragile. And so when you said in your deconversion video, which was really interesting, on your channel, when you said that you shelved your belief, your that 26-year belief in 1.5 hours, I was, on the one hand, I was like, holy cow, that's incredible. And on the other hand, I was like, yeah, I get that.
yeah. Yeah, it was a bizarre, and I've thought about it actually since then because I got a lot of weird pushback on that. And I guess it makes sense. On the one hand, every Christian wants to say, well, then you were never really saved if your faith can go that quickly. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, I'm glad that it's good that you found a way to sleep at night. What is
that
it
makes them feel
that
better. Yeah.
what is it that Mr. Bennett said? You think that if it gives you comfort. And I think that really fits there. So yeah, the problem for me was that, having considered this for a while, I really think that I'm the example of the frog that's thrown into the boiling water. If you've heard that story, I'm sure everybody has, but and I've never tried it because I'm not a masochist or a sadist, but I guess you can boil a frog alive if you put
so
it into
desire.
warm water. But you can put it into a pot of warm water and then slowly
Yeah, it's the
heat it up.
lobster. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But I guess if you just throw a frog into boiling water, if it can, it'll jump right out.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I like in my experience too. And I contrast it with people that I'm incredibly good friends with.
Mm.
Caleb Howard, for example, out at Tyndale. Where's Tyndale out at? And is that Cambridge? I can't remember, but he's been out in the UK now for 3 or 4 years. But working at this, evangelical organization as a researcher.
In house. Yeah.
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 And, Caleb and he went to Trinity Evangelical Seminary out in Deerfield, Illinois. He was trained by some excellent scholars that are Assyriologists. So like Richard Averbeck and Lawson Younger, if you know those names. James Hoffmeyer, I'm sure you know that name if you're writing on the Exodus. He's had at Trinity. And what I would say is these are excellent scholars. It's just when they come into certain areas of research, you can see theological commitments. And I think their research sort of hinges on it, or reflects that theological commitment.
So do you think they're being disingenuous, or do you think there's cognitive dissonance going on so that they genuinely believe their own cognitive mechanisms?
I think it's very much akin to someone saying to me that my wife Megan has just murdered someone, and then they start, or well, let's make something more realistic. If somebody calls me on the phone and says, "I have a great deal for you," this like I got one today. I got a robocall today that was like, "This is your cable company, and we have a great deal for you to make your internet faster and to, for even cheaper." And is that possible? Yeah. Could I come up with reasons to justify believing that it's real? Sure. I mean, I could think about, yeah, well, maybe there's actually a deal that's gonna, there in the long run. But I kind of am always going to be skeptical of those calls. And maybe that's not a justifiable reason, but nonetheless,
but
I think that's the same sort of thing.
But why were you then the frog that jumped out, and not the frog that just kind of sat back and went, oh man, this water is warm, I'm liking this.
Thank you for bringing me back to it. That was good. That was very smooth. So I would say that my friend Caleb went to Trinity, and at Trinity, it's not a fundamentalist school, right? They're far more liberal, I think, to a fundamentalist Christian. At least a fundamentalist Christian would say they're very liberal. So they'll say things like, yeah, Genesis 1 and 2, this isn't like a literal, like we don't need to read this literally. We shouldn't read this literally. There is no worldwide flood. The Ezekiel 26, yeah, that is about Nebuchadnezzar, and it didn't happen. Like all those things aren't any problem for them. And so because of that, I think Caleb was able to be exposed more gradually to these biblical problems and say, piecemeal.
He
like, all right, look, let's take this one.
Individual one at a time.
Exactly. And that's me hypothesizing. So I haven't asked him about that, but that's what I suspect. But for me, as a fundamentalist, I didn't really get into history because I have my Bible.
Yeah.
Like that's history. That's what I need. All the other stuff is just guesswork anyway. So then coming to Hopkins and being confronted with all this data within a couple of months. There were friends of mine that called it. They called it just knowing my background. A friend of mine, Andrew, said, how long do you think you'll last as a fundamentalist? Actually, he said as a Christian. And I said, oh, what are you talking about? And he knew it, right? And so that's the difference. I think that all of a sudden they just turned the water up to boiling, if you can do that. And that was it. I jumped out because there wasn't anything that I could confronted with everything at once.
Yeah, which is an interesting scenario.
Individually rationalize.
Quite often when people do that, who have really entrenched views, as I assume yours were from what you've described, quite often when you jump out with such force, you do a 180 switch. So you go from being a very ardent fundamentalist to being a militant atheist. And that can, because you haven't had that gradual kind of rational move into atheism or naturalism or whatever kind of more larger framework of worldview that you might go to slowly and rationally, you kind of jump into atheism, and you then become this militant atheist, and then you go, I've wasted my life, and I'm really angry that I've been hoodwinked, and you have all these emotional feelings that push you right back against your former belief. And I wonder if you experienced that, because you talked about how you went to atheism before kind of coming a little bit back towards a more kind of rational agnosticism. Is that fair?
Yeah, I never got militant. I did become a hard atheist. Yeah, it's true. There's no question that I was like, well, for me, I likened it unto a spider web. And of course, this reveals, I think, that I don't know anything about spider webs. But, like if there's a part that you could like pluck on a spider web. yeah, right. Or frogs. I don't know anything. Really, just read my book, But no, I likened it like unto a part of a spider web that if you could break off one of the strands of a spider web and the whole thing unravels, there's probably no spider web like that. But that's the inerrancy of the text, the infallibility of the text, and the literal understanding of the text. These were all things that you pluck any one of them.
Yeah.
Well, who's the guy? I always forget his name. But he's the
Jesus.
I'll remember it in a second. He's on Discord. Darth Dawkins. Darth Dawkins. If you talk to him, I don't know why he's the first person that popped to mind, but like everything, it's a system. It's an entire system. And you can't have one part. If one part of it fails, it all fails. Like the thing that he says all the time. If there's one fact, how does he say it? If there's one fact that doesn't necessitate God, then no facts do. That's sort of how it was.
Yeah.
Right. If there's one chink in the armor, everything falls apart for me. And
I do get that. And it's interesting. It brings me on to another point I was going to make. And I'm going to pimp some of my own stuff here because it's relevant to like my Exodus project at the moment. So initially I wrote a book on the Nativity Critical Examination, where I looked at the internal issues within, Matthew and Luke, and the historical claims that they make because they don't cohere, and because what you have in this, and then my second book, which of this trilogy, the Resurrection, a Critical Examination of the Easter Story, again looks at the historical intersection, because the two bookends of Jesus's life, the birth and death and resurrection, are the two areas of his life where the claims intersect with known history, right? So you can verify or disconfirm or disprove or whatever. You can analyze those claims really well, and then when you find that they fail, right? What does it say about everything in the middle? So you've got this ministry of this guy where the wedding at Cana, and they're making claims about the wedding. Well, who was there? What happened? How do we know that happened? And so everything in the middle is just mere assertion. So you've got historical claims of a birth in a particular way, or two particular ways. And you've got historical claims of a resurrection that happened in particular ways. And you say, right, these fail, bosh. How can you hang your theology? What can you hang your theology on? So then I said, right, well, there's another pillar here. It's not just two pillars or two bookends. We have three pillars, and one is the Exodus and Moses. And if this historical foundation of the Exodus and Moses is found to be untrue in a very meaningful way, if Jesus is fulfilling Moses, or Moses reincarnated, or sort of not a reincarnation, but a reformulation of Moses, and if the Exodus is a foundation upon which the New Testament is built, and because it's a Jewish kind of sect and idea, then what are you left with? I don't get it. So when you talk about your friends like having maybe a more esoteric kind of belief because maybe we think that's mythological, I've been having some really big arguments with some Christian friends who say, yeah, obviously the Old Testament is mythological. I'm like, yeah, okay, fair enough. Well, if you're not believing the Exodus, and you're sort of agreeing that the Nativity is mythological, and you're kind of agreeing that there's problems with the resurrection, what the hell is what are you hanging your theology on? What do you say to that?
Yeah, and I've tried to keep myself muted here because the babies are screaming in the background, so I apologize for that if it comes through.
No worries.
Megan definitely has her hands full. I think that, and this is something that I'll tell a story. I had a conversation. I had many actual conversations with my friend Caleb when we were at Hopkins and even after. And particularly during this, maybe the year or so, 2 years or so after I deconverted. And we did these sort of all night study sessions where we'd, wake up at 3 and get to the library at 3:30 and just do Sumerian for 4 hours.
You were one cool student.
Yes, I was something. And during that time, we'd have these conversations, and I'd say, "Look, let's break this down to brass tacks. If you would say, as I do, that look, there is no worldwide flood. The Hebrew Bible presents the world as a flat disk with a dome over top and foundations underneath of it. These things that are, there's those 6 days of creation 6,000 years ago. These are all things that you readily say, well, no, that's not true, right? That's not what, and he would argue that's not what the text is trying to say. And if that's the case, for me, if Adam and Eve aren't real people, what is it that Paul's saying? What is it that Paul's hanging in his beliefs on? and really capitalizing on. And you just said that then there are theological approaches to this, right? Theological rationalizations. But that's what theology is. But sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say just on that point, because it's not just Paul that hangs this theology on it. I was having this argument with my friend who was pointing me out to David Bentley Hart and other people who are saying, well, Jesus, I was saying, you know, if the theology of the Exodus is wrong, or the historical claims are incorrect and incredulous, you know, what how do we understand Jesus, who says, I am fulfilling every jot and tittle of the law? If we're saying the Mosaic law it never happened in the way claimed and blah, blah, blah. So it's not just Paul hanging his theology. I don't understand how people then say, well, Jesus was just a Galilean man and was trying to grapple with this. Well, I don't understand how he can be fully man and fully God if he can't even understand his own revelation about his own religion or what. It's just bizarre. So it's not just Jesus. It's not just Paul, and it's Jesus hanging his own theology on these previous claims. Sorry.
No, I think that's correct, and I think, you know, talking to if you talk to evangelicals about this, you know, taking as an example something outside of the Exodus or the resurrection, if you take something like Ezekiel 26 with the prophecy against Tyre, they'll very quickly and readily say, look, yeah, this was it appears for all intents and purposes to be a failed prophecy. Nebuchadnezzar is supposed to do it and it doesn't happen. And Ezekiel says it. They all start with those data points. We're all on the same page. But what they then say is, well, there's a theological rationalization of understanding of this. So, you know, just like with Nineveh, and Jonah goes to Nineveh and says 40 days and God's going to destroy you guys if you don't repent. And then they repent. And so he doesn't do it. This is sort of this contingent aspect of prophecy. And so that must be the understanding here. So like, I say this quite a bit, but when there's a possibility for reconciliation, when there's a possibility for explanation, that's really all you need.
Boom, because right? You've now come on to my next point. I've actually got a list of points here, and this was something which I love that you find this so important, because I bang on about this in my books all the time, which is possibiliter ergo probabiliter, which is a fallacy coined by Richard Carrier, which is to say, if something is possible, therefore it's probable, which is to say that here's a rationalization, and that jumps to, or here's something that might have happened. Here's a way that perhaps the census and Herod can be, you know, made coherent and contemporary. So here's a distinct possibility. There's like a 1 in a million chance it could be true. There you go. And then there's this jump that happens from, therefore this is what happened. From that to, therefore this is what happened. And they're like, and then Christian, I had a debate with Lydia McGrew on Unbeliever about the nativity, and all her answers and all her defenses were possibilities, right? And you saw the Christian commenters on YouTube saying, oh, she smashed that debate. And it's like, how do you, everything she said was just like a 1 in a billion chance. And then you're like, yeah, she gave an answer, slam dunk. And you're like, no, that's not how it works. And so I'm really happy that you find this an important thing.
I think a great example of this you can see in some of the aspects of the dating of the book of Daniel. So you think about something like, you know, the text talks about, particularly in chapter 5, it talks about how Belshazzar, the king of supposedly the last king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, is the son of Nebuchadnezzar. Right. Well, we know that's not the case. Like, that's not disputed. Like, we know about the Neo-Babylonian Empire, and we know who his dad was. His dad was Nabonidus. So that's not in dispute. So then the question comes, well, how do you have, first of all, leaving aside the fact that he's called the king, and he was not the king, right? He was a co-regent, and that's a big deal, that he's not the king. And leaving aside the fact for the moment that he wasn't reigning at the end, he wasn't in charge at the end. Nabonidus had come back from his sojourn in Tama, so he's not there for the writing on the wall and the this whoever this Darius the Mede is supposed to be. Setting all those things aside, just looking at, is he Nebuchadnezzar's son? And no, he's not. So then the first thing that you hear is, well, now wait a minute. In Semitic, in Hebrew and Aramaic, son doesn't have to just mean son, and father doesn't have to just mean father. It can also mean grandson or grandfather or great grandson or great grandfather. So anybody in that line, right? Okay, it can mean that. That's true, right? In the same way that if you see slave in Exodus 21 or Deuteronomy 15 or Leviticus 25, the word eved can mean, like, it can carry the nuance of, or it can apply to someone who's like a ruler, like a king. A king could be a slave. That's true. It can carry that nuance. But does it mean that here, right? That's the question. But that doesn't matter. The moment that you say that it can mean grandfather, now you've escaped problem number one, right? But then you push back and you say, well, now, okay, but he wasn't his grandfather either. Well, now, maybe he was, because we know that Nebuchadnezzar had a daughter that Neriglissar, this other Neo-Babylonian king, married. And Neriglissar married one of Nebuchadnezzar's daughters. And so it's entirely possible then, or at least it is possible then, that he had another daughter, and that Nabonidus married that daughter of Nebuchadnezzar. So now he actually is his grandfather. So let's think about it for a second. The word can mean this. It doesn't in any way contextually appear to mean that, but whatever. Let's just grant the possibility that it can mean that. So then you have to assume that it does. Then you have to then assume the very narrow possibility that Nebuchadnezzar had another daughter that Nabonidus married, and that's why he's being called grandfather, or that's why he's being called, using this word of for grandfather. Like, those are really.
And to make matters worse, these are actually contingent probabilities. So this is all about probabilities and how I don't think apologists really consider probabilities. Again, it's whatever's possible. That's fine by me. But when you say, right, there's a 1% chance of this happening, and then contingent upon that, there's like another 1% chance of this happening. That doesn't mean that the overall probability of this last claim is, or the whole thing happening is like 1%. It's like 1% of 1%. Do you know what I mean? So these probabilities get compounded. It becomes even less probable. So yeah, it's a huge problem. Yeah.
And I think, so this is something that there's a conference coming up in October 9th and 10th out in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And it's being put on by the Atheist Network Group.
Yeah, I heard you mention that with Derek.
Yeah, it's called Better. And the point of the conference is trying to engage with particularly Christian apologists and fundamentalists in ways that actually move the conversations forward, do them in a, in a better or more effective way. And this is the thing that I'm kind of working with because I'm speaking at the conference. One of the things that I'm working into my speech, maybe the main thing, is trying to get at how it is that we can take a different tactical approach and grant, just for the sake of argument, the possibility, and then turn it back on them, just like you did, and say, okay, now let's assume for a second. Let's just assume the possibility for a second. What is that possibility, right? Let's, if it's the 1% is of the 1%, is that the most reasonable solution? Yeah. Particularly, sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I'm just saying this becomes a Bayesian analysis where you're saying we've got alternative hypotheses. What is the most probable, and how do we calculate the most probable?
Yeah,
but yeah. Sorry.
And see, that's for me, that's really the key, because in the end, this whole thing about Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, there's another explanation that is like it's obviously the right one. I mean, it's like there's no question of it. This is the reason that consensus scholarship says, oh, well, yeah. I mean, it's because if you go back to the Dead Sea Scrolls, you'll see this text as the prayer of Nabonidus, right? And the prayer of Nabonidus is how he gets sick and, has this Jewish, healer come to him. And it's like the Nebuchadnezzar goes crazy story, right? And you know why it's attributed to Nabonidus, because Nabonidus is the one that went crazy in his reign and left for 10 years and started worshiping other deities. I mean, the language is this, like its language is parallel. There are specific phrases that are parallel between the prayer of Nabonidus and what you see in the book of Daniel. It's like, duh, they just mixed. It's a different tradition, a tradition that attributed it to Nebuchadnezzar instead of Nabonidus. That's why he says dad. It's not because there's some Semitic grandfather that then, possibility of marrying it. No, like let all that stuff go.
But that's where you almost need to
recognize
to present the actual, literally the probability to the apologist by saying, so just to be clear here, are you trying to establish that it's more reasonable for you to believe something with a 0.01% chance of being the case, as opposed to something with maybe a 60% chance of being the case?
Yeah.
Because if you are, I would like you to just close your eyes and walk across the highway, because do you know what? You've got a 0.01% chance of surviving. And if you think that's a good idea, dude, you go for it. Walk on.
And this is really, I think, the heart of the matter, to sort of bring it all the way back to that conversation, the conversations I would have with Caleb. Because Caleb, at the end of the day, I would ask him things like, okay, let's assume that there's a God, right? Like I'd ask him, how do you know there's a God? And he would say, it's not because of the evidence. It's not because of what the Bible says. It's not because of ancient Near Eastern anything. It's because I've had a subjective experience with the risen Lord Jesus Christ.
Internal witnessing, you can't, Holy Spirit, you can't argue against it. Yeah.
That's right. So I know it to be true, right? That's where he starts. I know it to be true because I've had the subjective experience, right? And I would ask things like, well, how do you know that's not Enki, right? How do you know it's not Enlil? How do you know it's not Allah? How do you know it's...
Muslims have had loads of subjective experiences,
yes,
and he would not believe them.
And so what and this is what, like, I don't do street epistemology, but I think this is sort of like what street epistemology does, right? And which I think is great. But to me, the crossing the road example is akin to, like, you'd have to add one more factor, and it would be your wife or somebody that you really, really trust standing next to you saying, you're clear to go now, right? Like that's you trust, you have no evidence of this, like you can't see it, in fact, it sounds a whole hell of a lot like, the traffic's coming, but because you trust her, you have faith in her, and she says, go now, you go out there and take that 0.whatever% chance, because you trust her that it's going to work. And that's the position that I think they find themselves in, because it's the position I found myself in. I used to say things like, I don't worry about science or evolution or any of these things, because obviously the Bible says it happened this way. And if they pressed me on it, I would say, look, God could create the universe with apparent age, right? He could make it seem like, I mean, Adam didn't look like he was 4 seconds old when he was 4 seconds old. He probably looked like he was in his 30s, right? So all the trees and all the grass and the earth and all the stars, they all look like they were 30 years old, having this type of apparent maturity, apparent age. And that was it. That's all I needed. I mean, I went years I don't even care about science. It doesn't matter to me, because I mean, the book says it. I trust the God of that book, and I have a possible rationalization.
Which brings me tangentially onto mentioning that I am going to make the monkey dance, monkey dance, because I love your Kent Hovind impression, but I don't want you to trot it out now. I want to leave people. Everyone knows it who's seen your channel, of course. So everyone from your channel who's seen this will go on, Kent Hovind. But at the end, I would like to trot that bad boy out, because damn, it's good. But
you got it. I'm working on my Otangelo now, actually. So,
Otangelo. Who's
do you
that?
know that name, Otangelo? Ah, okay. I'll let you Google it or YouTube it or whatever. He's he's
Otangelo
he's another
Grasso.
apologist. Yes.
Yeah. He trolled me a bit once.
Yep.
But
Yep. Been working on him.
Oh, good.
He's got a distinct voice.
Yes. So so what I was going to say next so building onto your idea of possibility ergo probability is a problem. There's another thing that you often talk about, which is the issue of, and I don't know, I suppose it's an issue that could possibly happen, but maybe hasn't happened, or maybe it has, you can tell me, which is where you could have this situation where a bit of evidence is found to support, say there's a bit of evidence to support David existing, right? And so the apologist could say, oh, look, a bit of evidence for David. Therefore, everything about David is true. Everything in the Bible is true because we've got this one little nugget over there. Yep. And I know that's something you talk about, and I think that's really important as well. Is there anything you want to say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably as you know, the quintessential example of this is the Exodus, right? So, I mean, if you read anything by James Hoffmeyer, what he's doing in his books is, I mean, you can just flip to the conclusion, right? And I know you know this, but for the audience, so just flip to the conclusion of his books, and you'll see what he's doing is essentially let's lay out the root of the Exodus and say, do the names match the period in history? That do the names sort of line up, or could they line up? Right. I don't think they do many times, but let's just assume that they do for a second. Were there slaves, Semitic slaves, in Egypt during the second millennium? There were. Did slaves escape from Egypt? Yep, we have Papyrus Anastasis, what,
saying
6, I think
did.
it is?
Yeah,
2 did, and that's all you need right now. And so if it again, the example that, of course, I always push back with, which is not new, or novel to me or anything, but or unique to me, is, like, we could lay out New York City, different aspects of New York City in the Spider-Man comics, right? But that doesn't mean that Spider-Man's real, right? It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I always use Sherlock Holmes, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah, all it does is say it doesn't disconfirm the story. That's all it does.
I've just written down, right, what this is exactly. I've literally written not disconfirm, confirm versus positive evidence. So what I find with things like the Exodus is a great example, is that here is something that happened that doesn't disconfirm the Exodus. So therefore the Exodus happens. I mean, I'm just repeating what you're saying basically, but that's not positive evidence. That isn't evidence for the Exodus. That is evidence that is not against it. That is maybe consonant with it. But it's not.
It's completely backwards. It's what a defense attorney would do, right? A defense attorney would okay. The prosecution has built this case of all this positive evidence. All I need to do is try to poke a hole in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go after all the different, facts in the case that they are purporting to be true, that they've laid out to be true. And if I can disconfirm one, then, they have to either modify their presentation, or it seems like it's not the case. So it's the opposite of what you would expect. Instead of if somebody's accusing me of murdering someone, I don't know why I keep going to murdering today, but if somebody's accusing me of murdering someone,
you're a dark man.
Yeah, an attorney, a prosecutor can't come out and say, all right, look, Josh owns knives, right? And the person was stabbed, right? And the person lived in this city, and he lives near that city, right? Why you couldn't build a case? You get laughed out of the courtroom, right? That's not how you build a case. You have to build a case to say, look, this shows how it happened. It's not that it lines up, or because if you say then, oh, well, Josh did it, and then my defense attorney would come along and say, look, you said that Josh shot him with his own gun. Josh doesn't own a gun. Josh never had there was never a gun made available to him. Like, there's no gunshot residue on his hands. Like, how could he have done that? It doesn't disprove, right? Because you could always come up with, as they do, some alternative hypothesis, no matter how improbable it may be. But what that would seek to do is disconfirm the case, or the assertion. And so it's funny to me that, because what they're doing, last thing I'll say about it is, like, as we just said, what they're doing is they're beginning with, I know that God is real. I've had this subjective experience, and I know that he utilizes the word of God, and I believe that my interpretation of the word of God is correct. And because of that, if I can find other things, that what they're doing is they think they found the smoking gun, and all they're doing now is saying, all right, I found the smoking gun. I found Josh with the gun in his hand, standing over the body. Now I'm just trying to show, look, he owned this gun, and look, he lives in the area, and look, it lines up.
So now that we've established that you are a murderer, just want to go on to a couple more biblical questions before we go completely left field, right? And I'm glad that you're in America and I'm in Britain, because I'm quite scared of you.
There's some distance.
Yeah. So social distancing, good couple of thousand miles. Right. I found it interesting. You had not a debate, a conversation, which I think is far healthier, but a conversation on myth vision with Derek Lambert and Jay Caballero about the ancient Near Eastern law codes, which is fascinating, because that's a chapter I'm writing at the moment about how they underwrite, or they are the sources for the covenant code that is the basis of the law code in the Bible. So he said something that's quite interesting, that you both asked him to kind of present what he would say to skeptics as kind of, or what he thought was the best skeptical argument. And then at the end of it, he was saying, but we have to remember, and he said, I paraphrase, but he said, and there needs to be some latitude, because we sometimes still just don't know what the biblical writers were trying to do. And he gave the example of Matthew quoting Hosea, saying, out of Egypt, I called my son Israel, right? Which he agreed has nothing to do with Jesus, or was really taken out of context, right? But he was saying that surely Matthew would know that, so therefore what was Matthew trying to do? We just don't know that, so we just got to keep an open mind. And I was like, whoa, hang on here, this is skeptical theism as applied to biblical exegesis, which is like, it's like so Jay Caballero, lovely sounding guy, but he was like basically saying, I can never accept that the biblical authors can be wrong in a really substantive way, because if they are wrong, it's much easier for me to say, in the same way that I can't accept that God could allow suffering needlessly. So I say, I just don't know the mind of God. Here's, I don't know the mind of the exegete. So, or I don't know the mind of the authors, sorry, the gospel authors. So because I don't know the mind of the authors, he's not wrong. We just don't understand how he's right. And I was like, klaxon, like this is like sirens going off, challenge. But it turns out that you recorded that months ago, and I don't know how to do super chats and what that means. So I just kept that in my head, and then here it is.
Right. Yeah, I mean, again, I think that for Jay, and I love Jay, like Jay and I chat all the time, and he's working with Bruce Wells, who's another brilliant scholar. We just had him on our channel, and of course Jay knows that I disagree with him on some of these things, but I really think that you've hit the nail on the head with it. There's this notion where we come to a point with the data. We come to a point and we say, all right, what interpretive model are we going to use to address, to tie all these data points together? what makes these data points, what model makes these data points make the most sense together. And when I come to the data, if I don't start with there's a God that loves me, that has revealed himself to me or to the world, if I don't begin there, I'm far less likely, right? If if likely at all, um, to posit that there's some morally justified
Of
reason
course.
or you know, some rationalization that I could give to make it make sense that we just don't know about yet, because there's no motivation for me to do that. And the thing is, we don't do it anywhere else.
No.
Right? So nobody comes to. Go ahead.
No. I was just, yes, you're right. I was like, yes.
Like we don't come to the Naram Sin, and I talk about this a little bit, but like Naram Sin, of the old Akkadian Empire, grandson of Sargon of Akkad, who deified himself, right? Or let's just was deified.
Yeah.
Right. And the text, if you go back and try to figure out why this is, I mean, his name starts showing up on cuneiform tablets, administrative, right? Non-propagandistic, texts. They're just economic texts, administrative texts. They're not really designed to be, propagandistic. Starts showing up with his name with the divine determinative in front of it. And it's like, okay, why is that? Well, then you run into these literary texts and these inscriptions, these royal inscriptions that talk about how he fought these amazing battles and delivered his people from the city of Agade, from these insurrections, these rebels. And because of that, the people requested that all the gods make him divine. Okay. I mean, this is contemporary evidence. This is contemporary data. These are, you can see it. Administrative text doesn't have the divine determinative. Next one does. Like you can see it, like there it is. You can see the art that's the stele of the not the stele of the vultures, the victory stele of Naram Sin. Here it is. Here's a picture of him with the horned headdress, and like he's a god. It's how they're presenting him, and it's all from his time. So if there's evidence, if there's any evidence for a guy being made a god or becoming a god or being a god, I mean, that's pretty good evidence, right? But of course, everybody comes to that and says, well, yeah, but the more reasonable explanation is that he's a king.
And that's why I think that's really important. You talk about axioms. So what you're saying about J. Caballero, it depends where you're starting out from and what your axioms are. So again, to mention John Loftus, he wrote a book called The Outsider Test for Faith, which is just down there, which is actually a really good book. It's a very simple concept, but he executes it really well in that book, which is to say that if you're going to properly evaluate your religion, you need to take yourself out of it, because what you do is you apply all these metrics to other religions. So for example, as you say, a Christian will say, well, obviously Naram Sin is not a god. I mean, duh. It's like, yeah, obvious, but my God is, like I always think about Noah's Ark, right? And I think Noah's Ark to me is obviously false for the whole host of reasons. Not enough water molecules in the world. The world's Earth would, like, the crust would implode, and how are you going to get a sloth and a penguin? Come on, guys. And venereal disease, who's shipping them in? Like, and like pubic lice. Like, has anyone thought of that? Like, was that you, Noah? Was it? And all those kind of questions. Like, it's obviously nonsense. Sorry, I derailed. So it's obviously nonsense, right? But what happens is when you're 2, 4, 3, 4, 5, 6, you're singing songs, you're seeing cartoons, you're seeing pictures, and you embed these things in your mind. I'm not talking about evangelicals who convert into Christianity, but those who grow up in it. You don't know what's probable from improbable, plausible from implausible, and then you grow up embedding these in your cultural sort of baggage and memory and life, and then you learn through your adolescence and into adulthood what is plausible and implausible. And then someone comes to you and says, oh, have you seen this claim about Muhammad? Well, why don't you believe in Muhammad and these flying chariots and blah, blah, blah? And you go, that's a crazy miracle. What are you talking about? That's insane. And you're like, hang on, dude. I mean, you believe in like the ark and animals.
The sun stood still for a day. I mean, come on, like it just stayed up in the sky for a day.
Just obscene. So there's massive double standards because people don't apply the metrics that they apply to other claims and other religions to their own, and these things get through the back door and then are never evaluated in the same way because they're already there in your mind.
Yeah, like we see this in Neo-Assyrian royal inscriptions. So if you read through, and these are contemporary with much of Israel's history. So you have Neo-Assyrian kings who write things even before that will write things like, well, we had to attack and bring into subjection these peoples out to the west because our god Asher extended his benevolent arm to them, right? And welcomed them in to care for them. And they rejected it and they rebelled against him and they sinned.
Idiots.
And so we had to, it's like, well, wait a minute. Like, you don't buy that because you see it for the obvious propaganda that it is. But then when you come to something like the Canaanites, or the Amalekites or any of these other things in the Hebrew Bible, it's like, well, wait a minute. Like,
100%.
Shouldn't we be thinking maybe the Canaanites weren't these crazy, 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 wicked people? Yeah, it's a great book.
Interesting book.
I've got it on my shelf. Yeah. And there's another one, Mary Ellen Buck. I don't know if you've seen that one. It's shorter. It's 2019 publication. But she, I reference it in the book. But it's called just the Canaanites. But she does something similar, but with newer data and a little more compact form. And she just goes down through the history of the Canaanites. And
I just want to pick you up on that, though. You said it's just called the Canaanites. This is just called Canaanites. I mean, who needs the? Right, far too long. Did someone say the Canaanites, mate? That is too long. We want short and snappy, short and snappy. Just Canaanites.
Oh gosh.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, we miss. I think we miss this. So this is the thing that I had a conversation with Michael Brown on his radio program a couple of weeks ago, and he asked me the question during that hour we were talking. He said, so I don't know if you know Michael Brown or his background, but like he's an ancient Near Eastern scholar, went to New York University, got his PhD in like Semitics and ancient Near Eastern studies. So in a lot of ways, he's very much like my friend Caleb or Jay. Like they know essentially the same data points. We all have the same data points. We're all looking at the same stuff. He said to me, how is it that you learned these things and it drove you away from the faith, whereas I learned these things and it strengthened my faith? How do you think that happened? And I think the answer's, I don't want to say it's simple, but I think it's clear enough that if you begin knowing that it's true, if you know from subjective experience, this moment that you've had, this, the experience of the numinous, whatever you want to call it, that that's true, then it does strengthen your faith, I think, if you press through it to see a challenge and to find the reconciliation and to go, God always provides the answer.
But doesn't this go back to like the probabilities where you go through a challenge that's like a 20% challenge and you go, yeah, I'm through that, even though it's only 20%. And then you go through the next challenge, it's 35%. And you're like, I'm through that. And you go through all these challenges going, yes, 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 yes. But in the end, actually, there's a massive fragility to the way that you've gone through this because they are quite often the least probable explanation. And it's just a mass of least probable explanations. But sorry, I interrupted.
No. Have you ever watched the show Monk? TV show Monk?
No.
I don't think it runs anymore, but it's got Tony Shalhoub in it. And basically, he's a detective that has a lot of psychological issues, obsessive compulsive disorder, a lot of phobias, whatever. But he's unbelievably brilliant, and attention to detail is just off the charts with him. And almost every episode involves someone getting murdered and there being an obvious suspect. It's so clear who did it. And then Monk walks in and says, yeah, actually, it was Frank. And they'll say, Frank, the astronaut that was in space during the murder, that Frank? Yep. Well, what? Yeah, he did it. Well, how did he do it? I don't know, but he did. So the whole show then is him taking these things that are unbelievably low, probability, and showing that they're actually the case. But the reason that the viewer doesn't scoff at, and eventually the characters don't scoff at what Monk says, is because he's right over and over and over and over and over again. And so here, I think this is the case with believers. Because it's definitely the case with me. So
is it because perception is reality and they're feeling right? They feel, I got through that and I'm right for getting through that. I got through that and I'm right. I have convinced myself I'm right. Therefore, I've got through that. So inductively, like now, if I get through this one, then I will be right again in the same way. And that will just.
And I don't even, this is what maybe is so insidious about it. I don't think it needs to be their experiences that leads to them having this inductive confidence.
Vicariously.
I think that this is the whole point of Hebrews 11, right? Because, I mean, think about it. This is, and I know you know this stuff, but I mean, like, just for everybody maybe that doesn't know, this hall of fame of heroes of the faith, the whole point of the use of faith in this context is that, look, these people not only didn't have evidence that this was going to happen, but they had all the evidence to the contrary, that it wasn't going to happen, clearly wasn't going to happen. Abraham, being so old, obviously wasn't going to have a kid, but he had faith. He trusted in God, and God delivered. God provided. And again and again and again. And so I think this is what the biblical text does for people, is once you assume its validity, or once you conclude its validity, all of that consistency, it comes down directly to you. And if you have an experience with the God of that, inspired text, and those stories are then true, all of those experiences then become yours in that sense of seeing the validity of God working again and again. And then, of course, it just becomes, and I said this to Dr. Brown, actually, I think he said it to me, that's what I would say, is that sort of, now I've lost the word, but where you see things that justify your position, you seek them out, and you
post-hoc rationalization.
Put away.
Post-hoc rationalization.
It is, but there's something else. Damn it, that's terrible. So you, like, if I say everybody in America is like mean, every time you encounter somebody in America that's mean, you go, see, but then you sort of forget about, or don't take into account people that are nice. It's sort of an anomaly, or whatever.
The hits and ignore the misses. Yeah.
Yeah. What's it called? It's called so. That's terrible. But anyway, people are gonna put it in the comments section. Like, Josh is such an idiot.
It's like two people with short-term memory issues, mate. That argue. Like, what's that word? I don't know. What's that word? I don't know. It's like you're asking the wrong.
I feel like this is where I live my life. But
we're going to come on to that. So this is the last biblical question, which is to say, do you think the Bible has maintained in the way that it has, and is still so very important because it is exceptional in some way, or do you think it was an accident of history and geography? Is there some way that justifies the Bible being the important document it is, or was it just the document of the people who happened to culturally win out?
I mean, I think to answer that, I would look back to Sumerian literature and liturgy.
Well, of course you would.
and I would say, so, Sumerian, they develop writing at the end of the fourth millennium, and you start to get literature in the third millennium, and probably the first half of the third millennium. And ultimately, it coalesces at the beginning of the second millennium down into this literary tradition that gets established, right? There are certain literary texts that get copied, they become important for the people. Scribes learn to read and write based on that tradition, and that tradition stays fixed. And it stays fixed for damn near 2,000 years, right? And it informs so much of what we see, to the point that when you get down to Seleucid period Uruk, they're still doing these liturgies, repeating these ershemas, these liturgical texts that they were saying, 2000, 1500 years earlier, right? It's the same tradition. I don't think that lends credibility to like its truth claims, right? I don't think that's the case. I think that this is the culture that had whatever advantages, whatever it is, and I'm not an anthropologist or anything, so I don't know how to speak to those things. But I've heard Bart Ehrman talk about this sort of thing, where Christianity seems to have come about at like just the right time. Now, a Christian will say, yes, because God brought it about at just the right time. That's one possibility. The other is that it's like, what did they say? That the water fills exactly the edges of the of the hole that it's in, right? And I think that's what I would say, that the world, it just happened to be that this was the religion, that the message that it gave, the hope that it gave, perhaps to the poor, the disenfranchised, whatever. This was exactly what these communities needed, and it spread, and that led to this,
which
growth.
is to say that the answer would be, from your point of view, a coextensive thing, where you're saying it's the right content at the right time in the right place. That and it's all of it. So it's not that it's so exceptional content-wise on its own, but there is some exceptionalism to it, or there's some kind of there's some functional excellence to it that meant that it worked in the way that it worked for the people it worked with, and the Roman Empire.
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking for this, if we're looking for like exceptionalism, it doesn't say things like don't keep slaves, right? Like it doesn't say stuff like that.
Jesus had
stuff that we would
the
expect.
opportunity to say, by the way, guys, hang on, hang on. Shh. Don't keep slaves.
Yeah.
Bad. Also, boil your water. And in fact, I've got a list of the top 10 here, guys. Just hang on. Right, who's got the dictaphone out, or who's writing? Because we've got loads of conversations that are written in the Gospels, so someone is recording this somehow. Like I had my conversation with Pilate on my own was recorded somehow, so somebody's listening.
Yeah, I mean, he wouldn't have even had to say it. Like he could have just thought it, because some of the gospel writers just know what he's thinking, right? So I mean, if he just thought it,
it's amazing. Anyway, so thank you for all that biblical gobbledygook that we have discussed. Now, just before we go on, topically, there has been Jeff Bezos faffing about in his knob rocket recently, and I'd just like to show you a picture of Jeff doing that. So can you see that? Is that showing?
Yes.
So that's Jeff's knob. No, that is wrong. That is not Jeff's knob rocket. It's knob rocket, is it? I don't know how to move this on. Is there any way that
I think that rocket cost $1 million?
Yeah, very good. So that's his actual knob rocket. And I was thinking about this, and because you are of digital Hammurabi fame, and therefore the code of Hammurabi is very important to you, I thought actually Jeff Bezos wasn't going up to splash his cash. He was going up to because he had another knob in his thoughts, and that was the stealer of the code of Hammurabi. And I just thought, and so I thought, isn't that fantastic? I'm sure that that's what he's modeled his rocket on. And I had a word to my my full-time graphics department, and I put that together. Sorry, my graphics department put that together, and we have. I think Jeff Bezos is in that, and he is. I don't know how to say this without just being censored by YouTube, but I think he is maybe spreading the code of Hammurabi around space for the benefit of the galaxy, and I think he's just a big fan.
See, I think that there's even deeper confirmation of this, right? That maybe we haven't even realized until now, and that is that the aliens are out there, right? The Anunnaki are out there, and the reason that rocket took the shape of the Code of Hammurabi is because that's the code. It's the code that lets them unlock the relationship with the Anunnaki out there in space, who are out there waiting, by the way. And of course, if you're not familiar with Lord Rael,
I don't know.
I think he's down in Baja.
I was having a chat to Tom Cruise yesterday, and he did it. I interviewed him on my channel because it's such a huge channel I've got, and he was just saying that's the Thetans or something, and he jumped up and down, really excited, and then like bounced away on a space hopper code of Hammurabi stealer, and then that was
there. You go. See, it all connects.
It does. So anyway, thanks for indulging me there. So you have a great YouTube channel, right? And part of running a YouTube channel that is successful like yours is curating a community, and I presume you feel you've done that. And part of curating a community and developing a community, which is all part of branding and it's all part of being a public YouTuber and whatnot. But it's an invitation of people into your life, your lives, yourself and your family, right? Because it's yourself and Megan who and others who run Digital Hammurabi. Am I right? So I thought, I couldn't believe it took me so long to find out through watching your videos that you've got MS, right? And it all then came together. I was like, well, that's why he pauses, and that's why Megan brings him back into the zone, and that's why he has these absolutely delightful self-interjections as well. One of your great affectations where you'll just go off on one and then berate yourself for like, God, this isn't 1965. Like, why am I saying things like this? And you're having some conversation with yourself, and then you like bring yourself back in, or Megan says, "Yeah, that's what you're talking about," and you're like, "Oh, thank you, right back in the show."
Thank you.
and I just love that kind of stuff. But it's what people endear to you've got to present yourself as who you are, right, in order to get people to like you, unless you're just a complete twat. In that case, good luck. But I think that it's important to have self-deprecating humor and all this, but it's also about letting people into your life and knowing who you are. And so when I found out you had MS and these things sort of came together, I was like, holy crap, because I've got MS as well. And I find things difficult, right? Sitting and chatting like this is probably the best form of me existing, but other things are like difficult. And I was wondering, have you ever discussed your MS with your audience at all?
I think that I have. I think that I did once. I don't think it was on our channel. Of course, it won't surprise you that I can't necessarily remember if I have.
Megan,
but what? Have I? And she'd come in and go, no. But I definitely don't hide it, because I think actually Megan brings it up quite a bit, because in no way infrequently do we get comments on our live streams, or did we? We haven't done many in a while, but where people will say, God, that guy talks so slowly. Oh man, he loses his place so often. Come on, man, like think through but what you're gonna say. And she says, yeah, we're so sorry that he has, a neurological disease that makes it difficult. They don't comment anymore, but
yeah. Oops. So,
but
well, sorry, carry on. No, carry on.
no. I was just going to try
I was just going to say, would you like to talk? I mean, feel free to say no. Actually, it's personal and private, and no, I'd rather not talk about anything. But would you like to talk through your sort of diagnosis at all, or how you found out, when you found out, what age?
So it was the sort of thing where I recognized that there was something wrong at sort of like it was like having a low grade fever, I guess you could say, where you just, there were some things that felt wrong. But it wasn't enough to really spark anything. And I like talking to people about MS. I mean, this is sort of a lot of the time, this is how it works. So I think as far back as I can remember, which of course is not terribly far, I've always had a real tough time with the heat. But it's, of course, it's gotten infinitely worse since then. But, I've always had left arm sort of tingliness, that sort of thing. But it's, at first it wasn't, it was really just, I got fatigued really, really easily. And I'm kind of a big guy, and so it was a little embarrassing. So you just sort of try to plow through those things. It was in 2010, I think. My friend Caleb and I were studying for our finals, into semester finals, and I was up at his house, and I used to go up to his house for 3 days at a time, and we would study, sip whiskey, eat, and just memorize all kinds of ancient Near Eastern stuff. And I got up one morning and I kept blinking because it's like, oh, I left my contact in, damn it, because my left eye was really blurry. So I went to the sink and I looked in the mirror and I was like, I don't think I have a contact in. And I looked, and sure enough, there they are, sitting in the contact case. So then okay, well, I've got something in my eye then that's making this whole thing blurry. And after about an hour, it was like, this isn't going away. But of course, I didn't think anything of it. I was probably just tired or something. So I studied for the rest of the day. In fact, I think it was 2 days that we studied. And then as I was driving home, I was like, oh my God, this is really difficult to see. It's difficult to drive with one eye. So I made an appointment at the eye doctor. The eye doctor took some, did an inspection or whatever. And he said, I'm setting you up immediately with an appointment with a neurologist. I think this is optic neuritis.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, I know you know, but for everybody else, it's just, and not that I'm like an eye expert, but like the optic, the nerve that runs through the eyeball gets inflamed and it distorts vision, makes it blurry, whatever. And he said, but I don't, we got to check something. So I was like, okay. So I went and saw the neurologist, and they did an MRI, and they said, okay, look, I was 30 at the time, I think. And they said, so you have multiple sclerosis, and you're at the age, and it's presenting itself in such a way that statistically it's going to be very, very aggressive. And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, expect to be in a wheelchair in 6 months. Jeez. That's what he told me. Yeah. And I was like, so they put me in the hospital, of course, put me on a steroid drip to try to, get the inflammation down or whatever. And then, so I've had, like, my left eye is shot. It's like, so, I always forget what they're called. Relapsing remitting, I think, is the one that I had.
I was just going to explain for those who are watching what MS is. So MS is, it means multiple sclerosis means multiple scars. And there are essentially broadly two different types of MS. There's relapsing remitting, where you have a relapse and you get really bad symptoms of MS, and then you generally get better. So you go into remission, and so you get worse, get better, get worse, get better, get worse, get better, and that goes on. And you take drugs to try and extend the period between, relapse and relapse. But for some people, you get worse and get better, but you get better only to slightly worse than you were before, and then better, slightly worse, and it can be a sort of gradual decline over getting worse and better and worse and better. So that's relapse and remitting. 85% of people with MS have that form of MS. Then people with that hit a stage at some point in their lives where you go into a secondary stage, and that secondary stage is just getting worse. You don't have better, worse, better, worse, better. You just get gradually worse, and that's called secondary progressive. So you have relapsing remitting, and you hit this stage and you get secondary progressive, and then it's a bit shitty. I was diagnosed because I was a bloke over 40 when I was diagnosed. It's far more statistically likely that if you're diagnosed as a bloke over 40, you will have what's called primary progressive. So that secondary phase that you will hit at some point where you just get worse. I got that initially. So I've got you're just going to get worse until you die type thing. So, and that pretty much sucks. There are kind of some debates over whether you really start with that, or whether there's some kind of missing bit of relapsing remitting you didn't realize you had, or whatever. But whatever, that's right. What I've got. And in Britain, there were, at the time I was diagnosed only a few years ago, there was no drugs you could even have. It's just like, sorry, you've got this. You might be in a wheelchair within 6 months. You might be in a wheelchair in 25 years. Can't tell. Sorry about that. Just go and try and live well. And you're like, oh, thanks for that. Cheers. Whoop. So, and there you go. But relapsing remitting, there's just an absolute ton of drugs you can take that will try and modify. They're called disease modifying drugs or treatments. So
I take one that's Tecfidera. I always forget. It's like dimethylene something or other, but it's I take it twice a day. It's very expensive. I was in the military, so I have
it wouldn't be expensive in Britain, by the way.
Yeah, well, it's not expensive for me because I have military health insurance that covers it, so which is great for me. But for people that don't, it's incredibly expensive. But so the optic neuritis has it's starting down the getting worse path. So right now my eyesight, at first it went away and I was like, okay, I'm good after like a week or week and a half. Then I started getting more attacks, and the damage just sort of sets in, I guess, is the thing. So like right now, if I do that, I can't see an awful lot. This eye really picks up the slack, which is fantastic. But I think with my contact in my left eye, I think I'm at 5/800 vision corrected. It's like something stupid.
Right.
Like, so what you could see at 800 feet, I can see at 5 feet, or what a normal person could see at 800 feet, I can see at 5 feet. So my right eye does all my work for me. So I have left arm spasticity.
Yeah.
And that's starting to set in a little bit more. At first, it scared me. So I would just, what it does is over time, it just sort of locks up like this. So there are actually a couple of videos where I'm in the video just like this.
Yeah.
And sometimes it gets that bad where I just don't, but at first, and I wouldn't do anything. Because it hurt to try to move it. Right. But I went to the neurologist and I'll never forget. Well, maybe I will, but I still remember what she said to me. I was standing there, and I had these papers that she had given me and I was holding them in my right hand and she took them out of my right hand and shoved them into my left hand. And she said, use it or lose it. So I was like, oh,
brilliant.
Okay. So she said, every time you start to feel it's tingly most of the time, but anytime you start to feel it start to really tighten, like really work it, try to lift some weights with it, whatever. So I've done that, and that's worked.
Do you get
I have some urinary.
Like, man, I could, I work from home these days, and that's just the delight because the toilet's only just there. Brilliant.
Yeah. And I mean, like I don't feel any shame, but like I wear absorbent material. Because it's just it's better than changing clothes all the time.
Do you get drop foot at all?
You broke up.
Do you get drop foot at all, where your foot sort of drags a little bit at all? Have you got kind of
not yet? Right. Not yet. Nothing's really happened with my legs yet, which I'm very, very happy about.
Do you get restless leg syndrome? Like when you get overtired, do your legs just twitch a bit? And I get that really bad.
It will. The left one will. I tried to, the twins are making it difficult now, but I try to stay really well rested. Megan forces me to stay really. She's actually the godsend in all of this, or so the higher power send,
the cosmos send,
the cosmos send, because like she's always buying me fans, to put in different parts of the house, or she keeps the air conditioning lower.
We've had a heat wave, so
because of course,
just for the for viewers, I think in the olden days, so they used to diagnose people with MS by putting them in a hot bath because heat brings on your symptoms really badly. So put you in a hot bath and go, and you'd be like, and they go, you got MS. So there's been a heat wave in Britain for the last week, and it's been, man, my body is shot at being able to do stuff in a hot day. It's like killing me.
And I'm guessing you don't have an air conditioner.
No, we don't have things like that.
Because people in the UK are weird. You don't have air conditioners. You don't have screens on your windows. Like, I mean, what's going on? Like, I don't understand.
Screens on your window?
Screens on your window.
What do you mean?
You don't have a screen on your window? Yeah, of course. They keep the bugs out. Like a mesh.
Yeah, we don't have bugs.
Yeah, you do have bugs.
No, we don't. We don't.
Okay, well, all right. Well, when Megan's from Aylesbury. And when we used to go back,
isn't that West Country? Isn't that down in the countryside? So they have a couple of bugs there.
Yeah, there's 4.
Max.
No, I used to get so frustrated because we'd sleep with the window open. It'd be so hot, and of course, like for me, it doesn't take much for it to get so hot. But then the bugs would like fly in at night, and it's like, what are we doing? Like, how much does a screen cost?
But you need to get over that. One of the issues I have is the feeling in my fingers. I've got really poor, so I do a lot of speech to text with writing, but on things like, so when I put Facebook posts and stuff like that, I'll talk to my phone. But man, like the error count for like interpreting my obviously ridiculous eloquence, the technology can't understand it, and then post some bullshit on Facebook, and then I don't look at it, and then post it, and then it's like, dude,
right?
Did you what? I can't even understand what you're saying here. It's like, oh, shit.
Priceless. Oh man. So
yeah,
I feel like I've been very fortunate. I take. See if I can remember what I take. So I take the main MS medication, the Tecfidera. Then I take oxybutynin, which is for the bladder. Then I take baclofen for my spasticity. I take bupropion because it has brought on clinical depression, which is really awesome. There's others. I always forget quinine or something, but it's something for nightmares because the neurologist said that if I fall asleep right now, I'll have a nightmare. It doesn't matter when I fall asleep, for how long. If I sleep, I'll have a nightmare. That's how it works.
Really?
And they attribute that to something going on with the MS. So they prescribe me something that helps a little bit with it, but I think it just dulls.
Have you tried hydroxychloroquine? Because I believe that's, somebody was telling me, was his name Donald someone, but he was telling me that hydroxychloroquine, it was really good for COVID, and if you mix it with bleach, then you have basically sorted. So hydroxychloroquine plus bleach equals no more MS. Donald,
Okay.
Donny,
It just injected somewhere? Is that?
yeah, Donny, Donny Trimp, something like that.
Yeah, that's right. That's I think. Well, it's either that or maybe just expose the body to some very strong light.
Yes, which I've
other thing
done.
that you can do.
Yeah, brilliant. So, so I what I did when I was diagnosed with primary progressive MS, when it's like, yeah, on your bike, mate, because just live well. So I looked into it, and I got this book called Overcoming MS, which is by like a doctor scientist guy, and he was like, here's all the evidence-based things that you can do, and it's all. And I was like, I'm a skeptic. This is brilliant, love it. So science-based stuff. Yeah. I became a vegan because basically you either do like a paleo diet like Terry Wiles, or a vegan plus fish, and that seems to be the two options. So I did the Overcoming MS stuff, and then I was like, right, what can I do? I need control over my future. What can I do? And so there's this thing called stem cell therapy, which is done around the world in several places. Russia and Mexico seem to be the two main places, where you basically control or delete your immune system and just reboot it using the stem cells that they harvest from your blood. And basically I raised like 40,000 quid, and due to the generosity of an awful lot of good people, and went to Moscow and had that done in April 2019. And my MS has been plateaued since then. So, I would massively advocate that to anyone, as the way forward, because there's no point putting sticking plasters on stuff. You've got to at least somehow go to the root cause. It's not going to cure EMS, but it will stabilize it. If it works,
that's fantastic.
If it works, it stabilizes to where you're at. And I've stabilized. I've got no worse, since I've had that done.
Congratulations.
But I don't know how long that lasts for, but it's something. So
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I was wondering, so your diagnosis journey, that was that. How do you, because one of the symptoms is short-term memory loss and focus and stuff like that. How do you hold down like a really probably a demanding teaching job? I don't know. Maybe it's really simple, but I assume that your teaching job is demanding. Plus you're writing. Plus you're doing all this, social media stuff. How do you juggle it?
So oddly enough, I don't teach, and there's a backstory to it, where essentially I finished up at Hopkins. I got this Fulbright scholarship and this other German, call it day scholarship, to go study in Germany for a year. And while I was out there, my now ex-wife, we're very good friends. Actually, all three of us are very good friends. Said she wanted a divorce. And we had 2 kids. So I stayed out for the year, did the rest of the scholarship year. And then when I came back, we divorced. And things sort of went sideways with that. And I had a position that I was applying for up at Brown University. And then this all sort of went sideways. We had to go to court for custody of the children to work out the custody arrangement. And the long story short is the attorney said, where you are living right now, that's where you stay. You're done. You might, maybe you can move to another part of the county that you're in. I wouldn't, he said, but maybe you could move as far as another part of the county, but you stay where you are. If you want to keep custody of your children, the custody arrangement that you have.
Yeah.
So that was it. And the really unfortunate thing was that it meant Megan had to give up her teaching career as well. Wow. Because she's an Assyriologist as well. But I was clearly worth it. I have a good job now. I'm in the construction industry, believe it or not.
Oh, so
But
you're not associated with a university then? You're not actually. Oh, right. Okay. Oh, fair enough. That's my.
yeah.
You see, I'll have a word with my research team. They let me down.
No,
I
I mean
think they were
no,
working.
it's
I think they
actually
were working
fine.
on the graphics too much.
Yeah, right. That's right. No, I mean, I'm actually, looking back, I really do think this was the best way, obviously for, in the one respect, but as far as this is concerned, I don't have to be concerned with, first of all, I don't have to be concerned about money because the job that I have sort of pays our bills and it's
Yeah.
fine. Whereas with teaching positions, it's
Yeah,
very difficult,
tenure and
to
yeah.
find one. So we're okay on that end. Uh, but what that means then is that I don't have to worry about publishing new groundbreaking research,
Yeah.
which then frees me up in my spare time. And so all my writing is done in my spare time.
And about what you want to
Um,
write about.
yeah, and I can really focus in on non-specialists and being this sort of liaison between the people that are out in the field that I know very well,
Yeah.
that are doing this cutting edge research, but that don't have the time to like distill it and make it palatable
Yeah.
and publicly accessible. And so I can sort of be that conduit, making sort of be that conduit.
That's what I try to do with my books.
So-
Actually, is to try and.
yeah,
I mean, I'm not writing anything that's new or novel or that no one knows about. I'm synthesizing stuff that other people have written and synthesizing in a way that is palatable and
yeah,
usable. And I think that's what you've done so well in your book as well. You're not as well. I'm not saying I've done that well in my book, sorry, but you have definitely done it well in your book.
I appreciate it. Yeah, and it's good. I mean, I enjoy how it's worked out.
Well, that's really good.
It's sad sometimes to think back through, but yeah.
Have you ever thought about MS and God? Do you think God might be punishing you for being an apostate?
I don't think so. I've never concluded that, because I don't think I've gotten quite that far. The fears that I still have, and actually, if you didn't hear that um, interview that I did on Michael Brown's channel, if you type in Dr. Michael Brown, like Bible or something in YouTube, you'll find him. You'll find his channel, and it was just a couple weeks ago. It'd probably be worth watching, because it's a very raw interview. I cry in it a little bit, um, because essentially what he's doing is pushing on why I left the faith, right? Really trying to get down to the brass tacks of it. And he asked me the question, what do I miss the most?
Yeah.
And we lost our newborn son a year ago, July 9th.
I'm sorry.
And yeah, it's sucked. But we have the twins now, so we definitely have our hands full.
Yep.
But like that came up, and like I broke down.
So do you think you would have had solace had you still believed in God? That there was some kind of greater reason for this happening? I mean, because I think
no question.
my opinion of God is that God is my opinion of God. My opinion of God is that he's functional. Right. It's functional, right? Yes. So when you lose God in your life, you need to replace. You've got a God-shaped hole that you need to replace with something, right? So you need to fill that. And so the questions are, what does God do in the life of any believer? There's going to be social networking to do with your church, and it's not really anything to do with content. It's not to do with religious content, biblical content. It's to do with psychology of your social networks. It's to do with attribution of morality. It's to do with attribution, like explaining things. Which, when you look back at the Old Testament, for example, this is exactly what the Torah does, which is explain things, the etiology of stuff, or explaining how anything came together or is, or the national identity. So it's the same for any human. It's explaining stuff. It's comforting you in death. It's comforting you when shit doesn't go your way. and all these different things. So if you say, right, God doesn't exist, all those things are still needs that you have, and therefore, without God, you need to replace that adequately with something else. And so, and that can be challenging, because at the end of the day, like atheism says that when you die, you die, pretty much. And so, you know, it's a tough gig. It's a hard sell.
Yeah. It's been a process. There's no question.
Yeah. Is it still for you? Are you still in that process? Or?
Oh yeah. This is like year 11, I guess. And I just looked at the clock. I'm probably gonna have to go shortly. But
I'm just gonna quick fire you 8 questions that will be like,
yeah, sure. It's no problem. Yeah, I mean, I think because I spent so long with God, not just at the like something that I built my life around, but really being the core of my being. My faith was who I was. They were synonymous. I guess in that respect, like losing that. I mean, it's still a struggle. Even, and I talk about this in the interview. Like, it's still a struggle periodically to go, what if I'm wrong? You know, what if I've missed something? It's difficult, and those aren't logical. Like, those aren't logical questions, because if you then press it, it's like, well, of course you're not wrong about this. But then you see, the thing that I always fell back on, and the thing that I'd say probably most evangelicals fall back on, is that they're just, as you said, there are aspects of this that we just can't know. And so while it seems incredibly reasonable that there's a contradiction here in the text, or that this prophecy failed, God's got something. His ways are higher than ours, right? So you can always fall back on that.
There's a non-zero chance,
Yeah, and so then it's like, well, if he's God, he can have that, and I just don't know about it. And now I'm falling into man's wisdom, you know? So.
Yeah, fair enough. And, you know, good luck with that, continuing that journey. Right. So coming to the end, because you've been so generous with your time, Dr. Josh. So thank you.
No problem.
And I've really enjoyed this. I hope you've got something out of it other than.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a lot of fun.
So some quick fire questions, right? You're not allowed to think about these. You just have to give an answer. Okay. And whatever answer you give, you cannot recant, and you know, you're legally, contractually obliged to agree with it.
Right, got it. So my worst nightmare. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, do you believe in libertarian free will?
I don't know enough about it.
Oh, Jesus!
Wait, is libertarian free will the one where
you can choose otherwise in any given situation, consciously and rationally? So if you rewound the world, you could actually have chose differently to what you did.
Can I say lean no?
Okay, you can say lean no, but I will say cop out. So just, that's fine, but it's better than I don't know. I mean, that, or I don't know. I don't know enough about that. That I'm not accepting that.
Well, it's like my go-to. By the way, it's not my field.
Yeah. We didn't talk about the fact I've got twins as well, and that was another weird situation. So yours are how old?
Yeah. Well, let's see, adjusted 4 weeks, 3 weeks, I think.
Is that it? 3 weeks? Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So, my goodness, you're amazing. Mine are 10, and it only gets worse. So, you know, good luck with that. Yeah, sucks to be me. Question number 2, quick fire. If you sat down and designed them, do you think you could ever create a coherent notion of heaven and hell?
No.
Okay. British English or American English?
British English.
Yes. I take back all the bad things I've ever said about you, and there are loads that I have.
It's so much better. It's so much better. It's the one thing that I hate that I can't impersonate well.
You said the word whilst. No, you didn't say it. I think Derek Lambert was reading out your book, a part of your book, and said the word whilst. And I was like, that's British English, mate. He's got to be all right. He's got to be okay. So
I say boot, I say bin. Yeah, I mean, like it's the beauty of being married to Megan. It's slowly taking part. And our 8-year-old will come in and she'll say, Megan, can I go into the garage? It's just amazing to hear. Can I go into the garage?
There's I'll send you an article. There's been this thing in America, you might have heard about it, that Peppa Pig has become like this big thing during lockdown.
Yes, they love it.
And
they love it.
It's so much so that all these little kids and toddlers have developed British accents and Britishisms, and it's just absolutely wonderful.
That's how it's that cadence. She has the Peppa Pig cadence. That's what she does.
Awesome. So, question number 4: British health system.
Can I go outside and play? Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Are you Dick Van Dyke from Mary Poppins?
No, but that's how that's. Can I go outside and play? That's what she says. Can I go outside and play?
Lovely, lovely. British health system or American health system?
British, no question.
Yeah. Bezos or Musk?
See, this is one where I don't know enough about them. I guess Musk.
Yeah, I don't know what for, but well done, I suppose. Do you think morality exists out there or in here?
No. In here.
In here.
No question. Yeah.
Interesting. Favorite non-fiction book?
So I've got it. I'm not thinking this through. I'm just trying to remember the name of it. Oh, nonfiction. I'm sorry. You said nonfiction.
Yeah.
Shit.
Is that a book?
You said I can't think. I'm trying not to think. This is really difficult to do. I would say that's terrible. I can't think of one. John Collins' book, Introduction to the Hebrew Bible.
Interesting.
2018.
You interviewed him, or was that Derek Lambert? I can't remember. You interviewed
both,
him, didn't you? Oh, right. Yeah, I think
both
it was
those
yours. I'm halfway through. Favorite fiction book?
It's called. It's a 3-part series. I don't remember the title because I never remember titles to anything. Even though I just remember the title of John Collins' book, but actually I probably didn't. I probably got that wrong. But
great.
It's
interjection, self-interjection. 2 of them on the spot there. Brilliant. True to form. Thank you.
It's about these people that go into the sun. I think is one of them. One of the. But it's this group of people that their planet is dying, so they get on this huge spaceship and they go off to like find this new world to populate, and people get cryogenically frozen. But it's a 3-part series. Into the Sun is one of them.
Is it Arthur C. Clarke, or is that Philip K. Dick? I don't know, but maybe I just said that last name because I wanted to. Thank you so much. I'm not sure I have any more quickfire questions, but I certainly enjoyed watching you squirm a couple of times.
I'm terrible at them. Yeah, I'm terrible at them.
That's awesome. Well, look, I didn't pimp out your stuff nearly enough, so I'll just put things in that box down there. And
honestly, if people watching, if they do nothing else, if they can make it to that better, I'm in the book, but that better conference.
Yeah.
Oz is, I don't know if you know Oz, but I mean, like he's gone through a really tough time recently. About
him on with talking with Derek. So
yeah.
In fact, Derek Lambert phoned me up, or not phone, like messenger, like we had a chat this morning. So I'm going to go on his podcast at some point as well, which is
awesome,
pretty fun to talk.
He's
about
awesome.
The resurrection. Yeah. You guys have been hanging out quite a bit, so and
he's actually coming up here again this Friday because he's doing like another
all the videos. Is that right?
Only 7 of them, but it was. I think it was a good enough excuse for him. Hey, let's just do another weekend of them. So.
Fair cop. Well, look, thanks so much. Thanks for all your time, and good luck with the twins and any other associated children. And with Digital Hammurabi, which is amazing. Keep it going. Thanks so much. And I hope that my project will be good enough to meet your, I'm sure, exacting standards. And I look forward to forward if
I'm sure it'll be wonderful. I'm looking forward to writing it.
Cool beans. Okay. Well, thanks, Josh.
Thank you, sir.